Good morning. Welcome. Welcome back. It is good to see you all, even you, Craig. My name is Yusara Antar, and I am the president of the Board of Trustees of Mainline Unitarian Church. I am joined today by the worship team of the Reverend Keith Kron, the UUA's Transition Office Director. He is the UUA's matchmaker between churches and ministers. Our intern and worship associate today is Caroline Bright. Dr. Vincent Craig is our music director, and Dawn Star Sarahs Borchelt is our religious education and lifespan faith development coordinator. A little more about Reverend Kron. He's also been many other things in his time with the UUA. He's been a part-time tennis pro, adjunct faculty for Star King Ministry School, and is an expert on Harry Potter. He's even created a Harry Potter Jeopardy game. Ask him about it. Yeah? Okay. Anyone joining us for the first time? Welcome. Anyone back from last week joining us for the first time? Second time? Again. I didn't tell you where to go last week. Welcome, if you're new and semi-new. Visit the welcome table after the service to find out more about us, and come to chat with any of us at coffee hour. We have tea, we have coffee, we have Red Bull if you're a millennial. Anybody? We have you covered, whatever your age. Who are we? We are compassionate thinkers and doers. We are diverse in faith, ethnicity, history, and spirituality, but aligned in our desire to make a difference. We have a track record of standing on the side of love, justice, and peace. We do not think alike to love alike. We are people of many beliefs and backgrounds. People with a religious background, people with none, people who believe in God, people who don't, and people who let the mystery be. We seek to welcome you, your whole self, with all your truths and doubts, your worries and your hopes, no matter your background, socioeconomic status, what you look like, or who you love, you are welcome here. I have two announcements today. The first announcement is about how to make announcements. So you get an e-notes, right? You get an e-notes email that gives you the lineup. It tells you who's in the cast for the week or bi-weekly. It will list a trustee that's your announcer for the month. For this month, you get me, it's me, for the entire month of September. Lucky you. Listen, if you want something announced, just let me know. You don't have to be special to get an announcement made or something called out. All of you are special, trust me. The first real announcement today is about the bookstore being back. It was back last week. Yeah. Shout out and thank you to Marley Singh, who's been overseeing the operation since 2016. Marley's recently tested positive again for COVID. She did not want that announced. Marley's reverence for each and every one of these books is a thing to behold. She puts on the white gloves, she takes each one out and dusts it and puts it back. It's a beautiful thing. Thank you to the Barney Marzolf for reopening this venture that is part of our partner church project with the one in Romania. Starts with a V. Hold your donations till October. The second announcement is about our minister, our next minister. Did you know that birth order is a better predictor of personality than race or creed? Eileen knew that. If you have a left-handed only child as a minister, you're in real trouble. I learned that yesterday from Reverend Kron, and you would have too if you were here. You should have attended, really. It was fantastic. It was very informational and fascinating, and I wish it were mandatory. And as a side note, yes, I noticed what group wasn't here, and I will address it as best I can. Better yet, you do it. Bring it up to them when you see them. Speaking of participation, folks, take the survey. At present, we're at 25%, at the risk of losing our draft position in the ranking for minister. I don't know the sports analogy. I will say this about the survey. It's not perfect. Don't excommunicate me, Reverend Kron. Take it anyway. Don't worry about saying negative things. Say the negative thing. Be honest. Whatever you choose to share isn't wrong. This isn't your only opportunity to give input, but it's the start of a conversation, and not sharing is damaging. The silent treatment is never helpful, and it's never beneficial, and it will and it can hurt us in a search. Submit the survey. There's a QR link that will take you to an online version. You can do the paper copy. It's outside in the atrium. Do it after the survey. Submit, folks. Apathy is a killer. It's a church killer. And silence is harmful. Submit, or the matchmaker will match us with a left-handed only child. We don't want that. Your minister's minute today is brought to you by Barbara Colton, the chair of the search committee. Come on up, Barbara.
Well, that's a hard act to follow. Good morning, everyone. So, Yasara was sharing a little bit about yesterday, which is I was going to talk about as well. Could I see a raise of hands of those who were here yesterday for the workshop? Thank you to all of you for coming. Reverend Kron, who's giving our sermon today, did a fabulous job of getting us to think about the kinds of ministers that we might be receiving on the search committee as candidates. The world has changed. You know, we all know the history here. We've had a history of white males as ministers. Well, we know the world is changing, and so are the pool of ministers. We don't know who they are yet. We won't know until they apply in early January. But yesterday's workshop was a way for us to step back and think about the diverse set of people that we might be receiving as ministerial candidates, those that apply, and to think about what kinds of reactions or unconscious thoughts we have that are triggered when we run across someone that we identify. And typically, we all are prone to identify people kind of on a singular basis. That was one of the things that Reverend Kron shared with us yesterday, is how we are singular in our definition of an identity of a person. It's easier. We say, well, oftentimes he said, it's black or white. But there's nuances. There's, you know, all different shades of gray and colors in the rainbow, as we know, as UU. And so yesterday, we went through a number of different cases, actual real-life cases from UU churches, to explore what are these biases. Because I think many of us will say, well, we're educated people. We don't have biases. We're able to see these things. And yesterday, in various ways, in real-life stories, we were able to kind of talk about these. And more importantly, not to shame anyone for any of these things that we feel, it's to recognize them in situations and how we as individuals or as a congregation would respond. So to me, yesterday was about allyship. And in many ways, that's also about how we would support one another and any new minister that we bring into the congregation. So really worthwhile. In the October What's Happening, we're going to have an article about update of what's happening in search, and we're going to also release all of the cases that were shared with the folks that came to the workshop yesterday. And I encourage all of you to take some time to go through them, look through them, and maybe even have some conversations in your small groups about some of the cases, because they're real life stories. And for all I know, some of these might have been stories from our church as well. So that was one thing I want to share, and that's part of the process, a big part of the process as we as a search committee are preparing ourselves for not having biases as we look at candidates. So it's important for us as a search committee and for us as a congregation. You all know that we're in the process, and USAR has done a fabulous job of letting you guys know that we need to hear from you. We've put out a congregational survey, and for some of you, yes, it's a little long, but really helpful to get that information. We have not heard from everyone, and our job in presenting the church to ministerial candidates is to be as honest and authentic as possible. That means sharing our hopes, our dreams, our priorities, our strengths, our weaknesses, our history, our culture, and where we want to go. And in order to do that, the 8 of us that are on the search committee, we need to hear from all of you in order to represent who we are authentically. So if you are sitting there thinking, you know what, it's another survey, my voice doesn't really matter, I know X, Y, and Z people are going to fill this out, we're going to give a distorted picture of who we are. We really need to hear from everyone. Take 10, 15, 20 minutes and fill out the survey. It's really helpful on behalf of our church. So that's happening and closing at the end of the month, end of this month. So you only have, what is it today? Today's the 21st? 10 days or so. So we really encourage you to do that. We're going to have some ongoing cottage meetings in October where there's additional opportunity for more smaller group discussions with us, and we welcome you all to join in on those. You'll hear more about those. So a quick update on where we are and what we know in terms of the search. There are 35 congregations that are going to be in search this spring. 35. We do not know how many candidates, how many ministers are looking for a new job. So it will depend on how many ministers are out there, what that pool will look like for us as a church. The other piece that I wanted to mention is a lot of people talk about the length of time. We need to have a minister who will be here a while, we're doing, et cetera, et cetera. The new set of younger ministers that are coming up, their sense of timeline is very different. We all know that people job change more frequently now. So one of the interesting other facts that Reverend Kron shared with us yesterday was, they're telling, particularly the younger folks, that, please stay in a job 4 years. So I think, part of what I'm trying to share is sort of some basic information to sort of set your expectations. The world is different, and we need to be looking forward to the future. So when you're filling out the survey, we're asking for what you think, but we want you to all be thinking about also what's best for the congregation. That's sort of what our job is as well. So I will echo, without the same zim and zam as Yasara, to fill out the survey, tell us what you think, catch us in the hallways, give us a call, send us an email, let us know what you're thinking. It's really important, and I thank you for this minute and a half or two. Thank you so much.
Now please silence your devices and join me in affirming our mission statement. Together, we transform lives through love, service, and our welcoming faith.
I've invited Landon to help us light our chalice this morning. To be human is to be religious, and to be religious is to be mindful. To be mindful is to pay attention. To pay attention is to sanctify existence. We light this chalice and enter into worship to sanctify the existence of our lives and of life around us.
These words from Lao Tzu. If there is to be peace in the world, there must be peace between nations. If there is to be peace between nations, there must be peace in the cities. If there is to be peace between cities, there must be peace between neighbors. If there is to be peace between neighbors, there must be peace in the home. If there is to be peace in the home, there must be peace in the heart. May we worship together to find peace in our own hearts and to help peace thrive in the world around us. Come, let us worship together. Our opening hymn is number 16, "'Tis a Gift to be Simple." We're going to share a story with you this morning. Some of you may know the story, some of you may not. It's about my friend Penelope. Penelope is a Tyrannosaurus Rex, and it's about her first day of school. It's entitled, "We Don't Eat Our Classmates," by Ryan Higgins.
Penelope Rex was nervous. It's not every day a little T-Rex starts school.
What are my classmates going to be like? Will they be nice? How many teeth will they have? This was all very important to Penelope.
Penelope's mom bought her a new backpack with ponies on it. Ponies were Penelope's favorite because ponies are delicious. Penelope's dad packed her lunch of 300 tuna sandwiches and 1 apple juice.
Finally, the big day came. And Penelope Rex was surprised to find that all of her classmates were children.
So she ate them, because children are also delicious.
Penelope Rex, said Mrs. Ludeman, "We don't eat our classmates. Please, spit them out at once." So she did.
It was not the best way to start school. Still, Penelope was determined to have a good first day.
She tried hard to make friends at recess, but standing at the bottom of the slide with her mouth open didn't help. She finger painted some of her best work, but her picture of the dinosaur eating the child didn't win her any friends either. She even saved Griffin Emery a seat at lunch. "You can sit here next to me," she said. He didn't.
Penelope started to notice that everyone was making friends but her. It was lonely.
When she got home, her dad asked about her first day of school. "I didn't make any friends," Penelope cried. "None of the children wanted to play with me." Penelope Rex, Did you eat your classmates? Well, maybe sort of, just a little bit.
Sometimes it's hard to make friends, said her dad, especially if you eat them. You see, Penelope, children are the same as us on the inside, just tastier. That gave Penelope a lot to think about.
The next day at school, Penelope tried really hard. But poor Penelope, she couldn't stop herself from eating her classmates. Mrs. Noodleman, Penelope ate William Emoto again. And they were all afraid of her.
Except Walter. Walter was a goldfish. So Penelope tried to make friends with him. Will you be my friend?
She stuck her finger into the bowl, and Walter responded by going, "Help!"
Eee! Cried Penelope. He's eating my finger! Wah!
Once Penelope found out what it was like to be someone's snack, she lost her appetite for children.
She stopped eating her classmates, even when Cece Woodman spilled barbecue sauce all over herself. And soon Penelope made friends.
Now, even when children look especially delicious, she peeks at Walter and remember what it's like when someone tries to eat you.
And Walter, the goldfish, stares right back at her and licks his lips.
Because dinosaurs are delicious.
I'd like to invite the children to join me in the McGinnis room. We're going to be learning about a couple of organizations we might partner with in our offering outreach program this year, and the kids are going to choose one to prioritize.
Well, speaking of offering outreach, what a strong segue. We are very lucky today to have with us Joyce Chester, who's the CEO and president of the Chester County Opportunities Industrialization Center. Our offering outreach today will be supporting the English as a Second Language program at the CCOIC. Now, I did ask Joyce if she chose to work there because it's the Chester County Opportunities Industrialization Center and her name is Joyce Chester. I was informed that no, that was not part of the process. However, I think it is a fun and happy coincidence. And we are so glad to have you with us today, Joyce. Come on up.
Good morning. You all look wonderfully delicious. I promise you my middle name is not Penelope. So I just like to take a few minutes to say thank you for, first of all, it was such a beautiful day coming here and walking through the woods to get to the door, and then to be greeted so kindly and warmly just makes me feel at home. So thank you for that. Thank you so much, Caroline. You saw her, who was there. Oh, there you go. Thank you so much. And thank you particularly to Lisa Lang for nominating us for this wonderful honor. So I'd just like to thank all of you as well. Let me just ask, show of hands, how many people know anything about OIC? Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Well, then for those that do know, OIC was started in Philadelphia in 1964 by Reverend Leon Sullivan. And the purpose of OIC, the mission, basically, get poor people out of poverty. So he started by working in North Philadelphia to help people be able to stay in their neighborhoods, get employment, and be invested in their communities. So in 1979, Chester County OIC was established, was incorporated. And you may say, in Chester County, beautiful Chester County, why do we need an OIC? Well, I'm going to share with you why. We have a poverty rate in Chester County of over 5%, 5.3%. Now, consider all the wealth that we have in Chester County. Chester County is one of the richest counties in the country. It is the richest county in Pennsylvania. So if you average that, there are a lot of poor people in Chester County. We moved our office to Coatesville in 2018, and the poverty rate in Coatesville is 33%. So 1 out of 3 people lives in poverty. And when I tell you that 1 out of 3 people live in poverty, single heads of female heads of household, their rate of poverty is approximately 13%, and those in the LGBTQ population as high as 19%. So we're dealing and working with those folks every single day. Last year, we served over 600 people. But at the end of the day, it's not about the number. It's about the people. It's about the individuals. It's about those one-on-one that we can serve and make a difference. Our tagline is helping people help themselves. And that's what we look to do each and every day. So we are so grateful for volunteers like Elisa who give of their own time to help somebody improve their life. In our ESL program, we have a very robust program that runs throughout the county with our tutoring program and classes. We serve over 300 people every single year, every single year. So imagine coming to a country, we serve those from many, many countries. Last count, it was about 30 different countries because it's English immersion. And in that, the students that we serve are so grateful for the support and help. Just imagine being in a country where you don't know the language and your children are translating for you. And you need services or you may need community help and you don't know how to ask. So we work with a population that is so deserving and so grateful for the support that we're able to give. In addition to ESL, English as a Second Language, we have GED Prep, which is a high school diploma equivalency. We have a certified nurse aid program. We have digital literacy and other programs to help people not only get back to work, but make a family-sustaining wage. Now, when I talk to you about those percentages for poverty in Chester County, that's the federal poverty level. That is not a life-sustaining wage that these folks are making. So even if they are making just over the poverty level, they still don't have enough money for those basic services and personal things that they need to enjoy their life, like child care and transportation and utilities and all of those things that we all just take for granted. I'm always thinking how fortunate I am not to have to think about those things, but to wake up in the morning and have to think, how do I get my kids to work? I'm down to my last dollar, plus feed them, plus feed myself, plus pay the utilities, plus make sure we had food for dinner. Nobody should have to bear that type of burden constantly. Our focus is to help them help themselves, to remove them from a life with no options to a life where they can understand within themselves what it is to make a family-sustaining wage and be able to contribute to our community. I love this work. As I was saying to Caroline, my life was in advertising before I happened upon social service. And when I came into it, I just knew this was the place I was supposed to be. It was so amazing to see one life change. You know the story about the seashells or on the beach. You can't fix all of them, but you can one by one by one. So I just want to share this story with you. We had a young lady come to us 18 years ago. She was from Nigeria. She came here with a baby. When she came from Nigeria, she was married, she was pregnant, and her husband kicked her out when she got here. She ended up in Chester County in a shelter. We had just written our certified nurse aid program. It wasn't approved yet by the state. And she came to us and she said, I know you have this program coming. Can I be in it? And I said, well, when we get it, when it's approved, you can. She came every day until that program was approved. She was our first student to sign up in the program. She completed the program with honors, went on to become an LPN, was able to purchase her own house unsubsidized. She had her little daughter, was growing along the way. So I had it in my mind to call her not long ago. It was about a month ago. And I said to her, it was right after school ended, because I asked her about little Emma. And she said, well, little Emma's not little anymore. And I said, well, what's she doing? She says, well, she just graduated high school, and she's getting ready to go to college. And I said, oh, wonderful. Where's she going? Well, she was accepted into Harvard and Columbia and Yale and Princeton. She chose Harvard. And I said, repeat that? She's going to Harvard. She's on her way, and I'm taking her. And I thought to myself, how wonderful it is that with all of the adversity, this one person could overcome it. And we've seen this story repeat itself over and over and over again. I think I'm over my time, but I get so excited. I get so excited to talk, any chance I have to talk about the work of that we do, my team included at OIC. Thank you so much for indulging me in this time. I appreciate you so much, and thank you for having me here today.
What a fantastic, oh my gosh, my heart. We will now gratefully accept your contributions. Our ushers are coming forward. For those of you who are on Zoom at home, you can donate via text, or if you're here, you can contribute via text too. Just whip out those phones that I know are all on silent. You can just go ahead and text in that donation. We also have these wonderful baskets with our very talented ushers. So now is the time. Zesty classical is my favorite kind. Dr. Greg, you are just killing it today. Killing it. Oh my goodness. Now it is time for our candles of community. We light a candle of joy this morning to welcome Luke David Leon to this world. Luke was born this week to Lauren and Nate Leon. Lauren is the daughter of David Hucker, and he reports the family is now home in Virginia and all are doing quite well. For Luke David, the Leon and Hucker families, We hold you in our hearts. We light a candle of gratitude today for Reverend Keith and our search committee, the hard work they're doing, the gifts he brings to our broader UU faith and to our congregation this week. For Keith and the search committee, we hold you in our hearts. We light a candle for all those in transition right now, like Penelope the dinosaur. Whether it's a new school, a new job, a new role, a new life, for those on new adventures, we hold you in our hearts. For those around the world who are currently enduring war and conflict, we hold you in our hearts. And of course, for all those joys and sorrows too deep to name, we hold you in our hearts.
Two readings to start. The first is from Emily Bernard. Emily Bernard was a doctoral student at Yale University in the 1990s, working one night in a coffee shop, working on her doctorate, and a young man walked in and started stabbing people. This is a story of the violence she experienced that night. I did experience terrible pain on the night of August 7th. The person responsible for it was the surgeon on call. I lay on a gurney feeling hopeless and afraid. The surgeon walked over to me and, without saying a word or even looking in my direction, plunged his fingers into my gaping wound. I gasped, and I instinctively grabbed his hand. It was only then that the man looked at me and he said icily, "Don't touch my hand." His eyes were Aryan blue and as cold as his voice. I asked questions about what was happening to me. He refused to respond. Only the attending nurses treated me with kindness and respect. Whenever I tell the story of the night I got stabbed, I always say the person who did the most injury to me, who left the deepest wounds, was not Daniel Silva, the young man with mental health issues, but it was the surgeon on call. The second reading is entitled Unclenching. It was a nearly perfect summer day for a walk. I wasn't alone. My favorite sighting on my street in Providence was a woman walking her adorable French bulldog down the street. I heard her say, "Good boy, Luke," several times as she pulled slightly on the leash to keep Luke from being too distracted. And around the corner, I see another man coming with a pit bull. And Luke goes stock still. But the pit bull is wagging her tail with the greatest of hope and charm, clearly excited about the possibility of a new friend. And she won me over. The woman is trying to get Luke to move forward in vain this time because he is playing statue. Eventually, the man with the pit bull reaches the woman and her dog, and if possible, Luke is even stiffer. The woman is trying to reassure Luke, tell him that it's okay, and the pit bull is sniffing hopefully and inquisitively at her new wished-for friend. And then, in an instant, Luke relaxes and sniffs back. And quickly their tails are all a-wagging as they sniff and nuzzle and snort. And I notice the owners have relaxed, that they too have unclenched. And they are now talking amiably, though near as I can tell, their tails are not a-wagging with the same veracity as their pets. It's only then that I realize that I have been clenching and feel my own body start to relax. I left the happy foursome and headed home, thinking how much of a metaphor this was for today's times, how we all seem to be living lives of trepidation, and yet hope and kindness are out there if we look beyond the stereotypes, if we present ourselves with kindness, if we just try. I think about the reputation that pit bulls have, and yet she was the kindest of all. Maybe in these trying and difficult times, we need to be more like that pit bull in whatever ways we can, offering a little hope and kindness to any new friends we might hope to make. I've been thinking a lot about violence in our world, the state of religion. Think about all that we have lived through during these last few years. Think about what is the future of religion. And it reminded me of a couple of stories that have happened in the last couple of years. I think about the man going into the synagogue in Pittsburgh, I think about the Catholic sex scandal that also happened in Pittsburgh just after that. And it has made me wonder, why do we trust religion at all? But then I think of the chalice lighting words that Dawn read from Robert Fulghum, that to be human is to be religious. To be religious is to be mindful. To be mindful is to pay attention, and to pay attention is to sanctify existence. And I think we are all religious asking these questions, particularly in these trying and very complicated times. It made me think of training of new ministers. Every year when I train new intra-ministers, I ask them to create a chart. What is it a congregation needs from a minister? People talk about things that you would expect. They need good preaching, they need good pastoral care, they need someone to give them some vision, they need someone to promote the congregation. What's interesting is what they do not say. Because in all the times I've done this training, not one minister has said, part of the work of ministry is to build trust. Part of the work of ministry is to do no harm. But then it occurred to me during my time at the UUA, I've never heard a search committee ask and say, this is what we want from a minister. Perhaps we've assumed it. Perhaps we need to pay better attention to these things. And it makes me think of the question, how do we rebuild trust in religion? How do we show up for ourselves and for our world when there is so much violence? And I think back when I first went to the UUA back in 1996, I started as the director of the Office of Bisexual, Gay, Lesbian, and Transgender Concerns. And just 2 years after I started, I got a call from the minister in Laramie, Wyoming, just after Matthew Shepard had been killed. He said, I have no idea what to do in this situation. Could you show up and just be with the congregation as we go through this? So the weekend after Matthew died, I showed up in Laramie, Wyoming. The minister had said, I want you just to say a few words, and then after the service, we'll go and lay some flowers by the fence where Matthew had been tied up and left to die. So I showed up in that morning, prepared to say a few words, and the minister read a letter that someone had sent the congregation and then turned to me and said, and now Reverend Kron will lead the sermon this morning. I have absolutely no idea, no memory of what I said. But I knew I was glad to be there with people in these moments of these unknowing. Later, when we went to the fence, the minister, who was brand new, put some flowers by the fence, turned to me and said, now Reverend Kron will lead the memorial service for Matthew Shepard. Again, no memory of what I said, but I never forget standing next to that fence. I never forget the people who were there in the face of violence, hoping for a better world. Later, I asked the minister, this was not what we had talked about. This is not what we expected. He said, I had no idea what to do. I was just scared. And that has made me think of where we are now in the world. We've never come out of a pandemic, not that any of us remember. Maybe some of our grandparents do. Come out of these trying times, trying to figure out what the world is going to be like. And maybe all we can do is show up for one another as we figure it out. I think about the author and researcher Brené Brown, who talks about how trust is built in little moments. What I'm very aware of is that it's also broken in little moments. And it makes me think back to seminary. I was in a class on death and dying. The professor who was teaching the class was a chaplain. She worked with young people who'd been considering suicide and worked sometimes at the hospital. One day in class, she asked us, to pretend we were a chaplain next to a person who had been in a serious accident, was dying, and could barely move. What would it like to go be the chaplain next to someone in a hospital like this? So someone volunteered to be the patient, and one person agreed to go over and be the chaplain. And he went over, sat down next to the patient, and took the patient's hand. At which point Anna, the professor, stood up and said loudly to the entire class, "Never do that again." We all stopped and looked at Anna, and she said, "I want you to think about this. Think about this person who's been in the accident. They literally have no control over their body. They can barely move. And here you have repeated that by taking their hand without permission. What would have happened if you had asked first, could I take your hand? Given the ability to say yes or no, given them just a little bit of control over their life in this moment." She went on, "Violence just doesn't happen in big ways. It happens in little ways. You can counter violence by giving people that option and choice." Never forgotten that story in all of my times in ministry. And here we are in this moment again. Just a couple of months ago, I had a dream. And in the dream, I was clinging to the side of a mountain for dear life. I look to my left, and there is another person who looks at me with great innocence and says, "Could you tie my shoe?" I look to my right, and there is a minister who, in the dream at least I know, who says, "I want you to help me find a church that's going to let me do what I want, treat me nicely, and pay me well." And we're all hanging to the side of a mountain. And then the volcano starts to erupt. Thankfully, at that moment, I wake up. But I think this is so much of what so many of us have been going through during these last 2 years. All of us hanging on to the side of something. And we somehow forget that everyone else is also clinging for dear life. There's a reason that teachers, ministers, flight attendants, medical professionals are all leaving. We've expected them to absorb the frustration of our society, and there is just so much more frustration in the world to absorb. How do we pay attention to that? And yet, I think about the possibility that church has. What I can tell you in talking with ministers right now is that all kinds of new people are looking for a church like Unitarian Universalism. And it made me think of a story. A friend of mine who just retired from the UUA was visiting his son in Cleveland. He was taking his son and a couple of his son's friends to a baseball game. And on the way to the baseball game, they passed the Unitarian Universalist Church on the west side of Cleveland. And the three young men, all in their 20s, pass the church, and they see the congregation with its huge Black Lives Matter sign, with its huge rainbow flag hanging on the side of the church. And immediately they all begin to talk because they say, you know, if I were to go to church, that's the kind of church I would want to go to. This is a church that is trying to make a difference in the world. This is a church that is dealing with a world that I understand. And as I thought about that, I wondered, well, what would happen if they showed up in our congregation? Sure, they would be welcomed, people would be nice, they'd be there to show up to make a difference, and they would be told, you are welcome here. But would it come with a caveat, you are welcome here as long as you act like the 60, 70, and 80-year-olds in our congregation? You are welcome here as long as you give like the 60, 70, and 80-year-olds in our congregation. You are welcome here as long as you serve on 14 committees like the 60, 70, and 80-year-olds in our congregation. We often do the same for anyone who is outside our norm, for new Black, Indigenous people of color, for trans folks who come in. You are welcome here as long as you act like us, as long as you think like us, as long as you behave like us. And yet we know the world is different. And we know we still have a lot to do, we have a lot to learn. I've visited over 450 congregations, and I never forget this story that a friend of mine, an African-American colleague, about going to visit a church and preaching one morning. He showed up in a suit, tie, sermon, walked into the building. The greeter of the church looked at him and said, "Are you here to clean the building this morning?" Because they were expecting someone who looked like them. I can tell you in 450 visits in congregations, I've never had anyone ask me if I was going to clean the building, if that's why I was there. Keep thinking, this is a moment when we can really engage in the world. This could be a golden moment for Unitarian Universalism. A lot of people out there looking for a world whose values are a place where they feel like they can make a difference in the world, a place where people of multiple theologies can live side by side. And how will we welcome those folks? Or will we do harm and they never come back? I always think of a story a friend of mine told me. Another Unitarian minister was talking with a Mormon elder when she was in Utah. And she said the Mormon elders told her this about Unitarian Universalists. She said, "The Mormon elder told me that Unitarian Universalists attract as many visitors as the Mormons do. And we are grateful that you don't know how to keep them. Because if you did, you all would be dangerous." I wish for a Unitarian Universalist faith that was more dangerous to the world. A place where a Black Lives Matter flag, a rainbow flag could all be up, where 25-year-olds are welcome. But so often we reduce our faith to a single story. Yesterday in the workshop, I talked about the Nigerian author Chimamanda Adichie, who offers this quote about stereotypes. She says, "The problem with stereotypes is not that they are untrue, but they are incomplete. They make one story the only story." This could be a golden age for a religion that will allow multiple stories to be together, all in one person and all in all the people who are gathered. In these times, how will we unclench? How will we do no harm? How will we pay attention? How will we sanctify existence? Can we be people of different minds who disagree? I think of my old seminary professor who talked about serving with the deans of other schools at the Graduate Theological Union in California. He was sitting in a meeting, and he and the dean of the Lutheran school completely disagreed on something. And he said, what intrigued me most was that the other 7 people were trying to make it better. And he finally said, "I want you to know that Jeff and I will be friends long after this meeting is over. We disagree on this one thing. I would rather hear what you have to say so that we can make a decision and move forward." How can we be people of different opinions and still be together? I think it's possible. And yet so often we rush to return to the single story. A final story about this, and then I will close. I think about this a lot. When I was first in my job 25 years ago, I'd been asked to go to a conference on gender, sexuality, and religion. Remember that it was 1997. There were 40 different religions represented. We were on a long stage and passing microphones back and forth to each other. I noticed I'm seated next to John from the Church of God and Mark from the Church of Christ. The microphone goes to John, who says, "Hi, my name is John, and I'm from the Church of God, and I'm to the right of the right." People laugh. He hands the microphone to me, and I go, "Hello, my name is the Reverend Keith Kron. I'm the director of the Office of Bisexual, Gay, Lesbian, and Transgender Concerns for the Unitarian Universalist Association," at which point I have to stop talking because John and Mark are scooting their chairs away from me. And I went, "And we are to the left of the left." I then had to pitch the microphone to Mark. We spent 4 days talking about all things around gender, religion, and sexuality. They were amazed that even back then we had more women ministers than men. They were amazed that we welcomed openly gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender people in our ministry. They were stunned that we had a sexuality curriculum for children and youth and young adults that talked positively about sexuality and continued it throughout the lifespan. We spent 4 days talking about this, and finally on the last day, John and Mark and two of his friends, probably named Matthew or Luke, came up to me and they said, "We'd like to have lunch with you." And I thought, well, this will be fun. But I agreed. We discovered we were all originally from Tennessee. They were surprised I'd gone to the University of Tennessee. And we talked a little pleasantry at first before they finally got to what they really wanted to talk about. And Mark said to me, "We want you to know that we have listened to you all week. We have listened to what you've said, and we want you to know that we disagree with literally every single word that you have said. But we also wanted you to know that we respect you, because at least you are clear about what you believe. And that we have respect for." And they were my teachers in that moment, that people of such different understandings could in fact be a part of the world. And I think in this moment, that is the challenge of our world. Can we do that? And it starts here in our congregations. It was interesting because then one tentatively, since I had gone to the University of Tennessee, asked me if I knew anything about football, and they were surprised to discover that not only did I know more about football than them, I'd worked my way through college as a football referee. And I got to be their teacher in that moment, that each of us is more than a single story, that each of us brings many gifts to who we are. And that is my wish for us, that we figure out a way to be together despite our difference, that we do not eat our classmates, but we build trust with one another, that we work together to be religious, and that we work together toward a new future to sanctify existence. My wish and hope and commitment for you is to work with you through this next year as you work to find a minister who will help you all continue to deepen that and to do that. Our closing hymn is number 1017, "We Are Building a New Way."
We are building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way, feeling stronger every day. We are building a new way. We are working to make free. We are working to be free.
We extinguish our chalice with these words from poet and author Maya Angelou. I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. Go in peace, go in love, work for justice, go forth and bless the world. Amen.